I'm Deborah and I'm from the United Kingdom. I live in Warwickshire and I am a private equity investor. To start off with, I have been aware of my gender feelings from a very young age. My earliest memory of it is when I think I was 3 years old, and I know that at that stage I was aware that it was wrong to have those feelings. So for weeks I pondered how best to ask my mother the question that was most important to me, which was, what would I grow up to be? Would I grow up to be male or female? And in the end I worked out how to ask the question in a way that wouldn't alert her to my feelings. And I just said, boys grow up to be men, don't they? That was such a phenomenally important question for me to ask her, though, even at that stage. But it also it reminds me that I didn't accept myself even as young as 3. And through my life subsequent to that, I kept my feelings a complete secret from the world, and sort of also from myself to an extent. So I played the role of a male, growing up in a male environment, and I felt myself to be different. I knew I was different, but I also didn't think I had any choice. I didn't think changing gender was a possibility. And as I grew older, the only role models I saw were drag queens and sex workers. And neither of those was me. So I chose to continue to suppress how I felt about myself. I got married and had a family and did all of the normal things that would be expected of me. And I am delighted that I did have children. But as I have grown older, so my feelings about my gender have become more acutely distressing for me. And I suppose the dawn of the internet was also the dawn of the awakening of myself as a transsexual woman, because I discovered there were other people like me. And more importantly, I suppose I made friends with people who were kind enough to help me find myself as a woman. Friends who I could engage in normal social interaction with, who would take me out in the early days to buy wigs and help me choose clothing and so forth. And without their support, I wouldn't be where I am now, I don't think. But that was the first awakening for me of the realization that not only did I have these feelings, but that I could do something about it. And I nevertheless wrestled with it because I'm an extremely rational person, and I did not think it was logical for me to want to change gender. It defied all the kind of reasons that I could possibly come up with for, who I was and where I was. And yet I had these incredibly powerful emotions driving me forward. So I decided that I would try to continue to suppress who I was, and for many years continued, knowing that at some stage in my life it was almost inevitable that I would change gender. And for me the question became not whether I would transition, but when. And that really is something that has been influenced more than anything else by my family circumstances. And now I feel that my family circumstances are at a stage where it is appropriate to take the next stage. And I think the second part of your question, or another component of your question, was about how I came to self-acceptance. And I think that was in part through learning that I could successfully interact with other people who would treat me as the woman that I wanted to be, who'd validate me, who'd be generous enough to validate me as I was going through the process of creating the new version of me. And I suppose I've learned the most important thing is to have confidence in yourself and who you are. So I now feel ready to take the next step, which is to be full-time acknowledged by the world as a woman. And for me, the most important stage was the facial surgery. So my surgery is scheduled for tomorrow, and the question is, how am I feeling about it? And I'm shocked in some ways by how calm and relaxed and almost happy, in fact, happy I am feeling about the prospect. I don't feel what I was expecting, which is enormous anxiety. I suppose I've been reassured by the number of conversations I've had with the doctor and the team, and I feel calm and relaxed and happy. My experience of the surgery was surprisingly good. I wasn't really expecting it to be very troubling because Dr. van der Dusen was very relaxing of me in the days before, and I felt calm and happy going into it. But I was very surprised by how rapidly, on waking up, I felt absolutely in good shape, and so I had obviously no experience of the surgery whatsoever. I was delighted to discover my hair had been plaited. That was a surprise, but because I can't plait my own hair. But the actual surgery itself and the sort of feeling post-surgery was really not in the least bit troubling.
So there was proportionally in the frontal view, we have the equal thirds, and the width is okay. You have your cheekbones in the proper position. You have a slight OG line over here and a straight mandibular line as a V shape. So that's the frontal view. And the lateral view, when we see it over here, the frontal bossing is totally gone, and you have a nice S shape over here, a straight nose, and the lower third of the face has also the proper positioning, and you can see also the very nice straight lines from the lower jaw and the mandibular angle reduction. Beautiful, I like it.
Thank you. So I only had one night. I only stayed one night in hospital, which was brilliant, and it was delightful to be able to be discharged so rapidly. And I have to say, I felt like I was walking on air as I left the hospital, because it just, although, obviously you have a slightly puffy face and so forth, and not everything's perfect, and you've got a great big thing over your nose and whatnot, it just felt different in a really good way, and it felt right. And I sort of knew even at that stage that it was going to be good. And whereas previously one would kind of leave the house with a little bit of apprehension because you didn't know how people would perceive you and so forth, all of that sort of the apprehension I used to have prior to having my surgery completely left me, even despite the fact that I was wearing bandages and looked probably a bit of a fright. I just felt like I looked female, and that was just fabulous.
for the first few days post-surgery, I had the tampons in my nose, I had the bridge over my nose and so forth, so I couldn't really see what I looked like. Although I have to say there was some bruising and a lot of swelling. So, but I looked at myself in the mirror and I just felt really happy at what I was seeing, even at that stage. And frankly, that all subsided very rapidly. I took the tampons out after 3 days from my nose, so I could breathe nicely again. That was relatively straightforward. And it was my birthday about 6 days after surgery, and I just couldn't resist taking my nose guard off for my birthday celebration. So we went to... I was in Belgium, but we were staying at a friend's house at that stage, in Brussels. And so we had a wonderful birthday celebration to celebrate my new nose and on my new face and everything. It's fabulous. I was very excited and happy about that. And then I obviously snuck the nose guard back on again because I didn't want to be too naughty. But I'd seen the results and I was absolutely delighted with it. And we returned to the UK after a week. I felt absolutely fine. Didn't feel tired or didn't have any significant pain or any trouble whatsoever. I was just absolutely delighted. And I should say I was very nicely supported by my partner David all the way through it. He looked after me. And I probably let him look after me more than in retrospect perhaps he needed to have done. So I revealed my new face to a variety of different people over the next month. And I think actually as soon as I came back to the UK, I had to go to a board meeting, in fact, at one of my companies. So that was the first test of how I would look. And of course, these people had only known me in my previous gender up to that point as well. And I have to say, it was as easy as anything. It didn't feel like anything had particularly changed, which was precisely what I was hoping for. They were, very capable of dealing with me at the same level and in the same way as before. They got my gender right. It was easy. And I hope I made it easy for them by making light of it to an extent as well. So it wasn't a sort of big, heavy thing, but we all had a bit of a laugh and a joke. My children reacted quite well as well. To the two children who saw me first, the first one said, "So he hasn't botched your surgery?" Which is about the best you can get out of a teenager by way of a compliment. And so I think they were, all things considered, especially considering they hadn't seen me as a woman up to that point, I think their reactions were as good as you could expect them to be. And in fact, that generally has been my experience with everybody I've interacted with who's known me before, has been very easily able to accommodate my change, to the extent that it almost feels like it was a non-event, which was fabulous. Since then, I've had a few occasions when I've met people who I hadn't seen for quite a few years and hadn't had the chance to be forewarned about my change. And so I've had a variety of different quite comical reactions, I have to say, from people recognising me but just not being able to work out who I was, which has happened quite a bit. I went to a reunion at a company I used to work at. And on another occasion, after an hour-long meeting with somebody, he asked if I could send my regards to my old male self, not realising who I was. Which was brilliant as well. And of course I told him he just had done. So everything was very positive.
Yeah. Okay.
So I didn't have many fears going into the surgery, but obviously at the back of your mind is the awareness that your face is what you present to the world. So it's the most important aspect of you. And so you do have a slight need to think carefully before you choose who to work with on your surgery. But I have to say, by the time it got to surgery itself, I really had no apprehension to speak of that I was doing the right thing. And certainly subsequent to it, I was surprised by how incredibly delighted I felt about the results. Even day one results. It was fabulous. In terms of getting used to how I now look, it's quite funny. To begin with, I have to say, I was looking at myself in the mirror very much to sort of see what had changed, and sometimes I was wondering, has anything changed? And other times I was thinking, my gosh, that's massively different. And it took a little bit of getting used to how I now look. But now I look at my face and it seems like it's the face I've always had.